Let's start with what is emotional intelligence. It's the ability to draw on emotional resources and information to help manage our own and others' emotions. So the focus is on emotional information and resources. So it has to do with, I'm aware when I'm angry, I'm aware when I'm sad, I'm aware when I'm happy, I'm aware when you're angry, when you're sad, when you're happy, I can read your cues, I know how to respond, in our relationship. So it has a lot to do with emotion and affect, internally and externally with people I'm interacting. Super important, no question about it. Now, spiritual intelligence, as I said, is the ability to draw on spiritual resources and qualities and embody them in daily life. So what are those? There's a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with emotion, like purpose or intuition or higher self. These are not emotional resources. They are different things. Now, why is there some overlap? Because emotional intelligence involves self-awareness of your emotions. Spiritual intelligence involves self-knowledge, is a deeper level with things like mindfulness and so on. So that may include awareness of your emotions, but it will go deeper. Like spiritual intelligence gets you to focus on knowing yourself at a deeper level, which involves your unconscious and tuning into your dreams and things that might be lurking in the unconscious.
Welcome to the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. I am your host, Jamal Javanji. I'm a best-selling author, podcaster, full-time life coach, and a communications and cultural analyst. After spending over 20 years of working with people in various stages of struggle and challenge, and after traveling to many places all around the world, visiting many different cultures, I have discovered the common roots of human suffering, along with the sustainable solutions required to help people heal and become whole and liberated. This podcast is my gift to you to serve you on your journey into healing, wholeness, and liberation. I invite you to buckle in and to settle in to each episode here on this podcast. There's something for you in each conversation. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the show. Really glad to have you. I'm excited for this conversation today. I have a very special guest with me today. We're going to, in a few minutes, I'll introduce my guest, but I want to just tell you a little bit about Dr. Yosi Amram. He's lived quite the life, has a lot of fantastic experience at life, and has learned a lot of lessons along the way. We're going to have a very important conversation really about spiritual intelligence and spiritual leadership. And in our world today, this is, in my opinion, I feel like this is something that's sorely needed at every level, is not just leadership, but spiritual leadership. We're going to talk about what that means, because I know that word can have some baggage for people. But a little bit about Dr. Yosi Amram. He is a clinical psychologist, an executive coach, and he's a pioneer in research for spiritual intelligence. It's a concept that has received over 1,000 academic citations. His background is fascinating. He grew up in a Jewish home in war-stricken Israel. Dr. Amram has received early exposure to religious fundamentalism, as you can probably imagine, a lot of war and trauma that came with that. He's worked in the leadership at the CEO level, and just there's so much that we could say about him. But he's really working, really works with a lot of. He's been, billed as a trusted advisor and mentor for leaders who work for a broad spectrum of businesses. He's worked with startups to large corporations, and he's got an MBA from Harvard University and a PhD from Sofia University in Clinical Transpersonal Psychology. So again, lots of things we can say about Dr. Amram, but we're just very honored to have him here on the show. And be ready. I say this a lot with our conversations, but if you're listening to this, just be prepared to take notes. Don't just let this be audio, kind of audio ear candy where it just passes in and passes out. Be prepared to capture. There are going to be certain things said here that you're going to notice, and I would encourage you to pay attention to that. What is it that sticks out to you? Write it down. If you're old school like me, pen and paper, or you could pull out your smartphone and just jot it down as a note, and then be prepared to share this episode with that person who comes to mind for you that you feel like could really benefit from this conversation. Okay. But with all that said, Dr. Amram, am I saying that correctly? Is that
are.
right?
Thank you, Jamal, for
Awesome. Yes.
the introduction. You can just call me Yosi. Is
Yosi?
fine. Yeah.
Okay.
I prefer that.
Okay. Well, so glad. Thank you for being on the show here. Really appreciate you making time.
Yeah, I'm honored, happy to be here. Grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you. Well, I always like to start conversations with our guests with, I always say it's always good to start at the beginning. So for you, can you talk a little bit about your beginnings, at least in this life here? What was it like for you?
Kind of starting a year and a half ago or so when I was born. Okay, well, I think the best place for me to start, quote, beginning that relates to what we're talking about is spiritually intelligent leadership, is indeed, as you said, getting drafted to the military in Israel as a teenager. And even though I was a pacifistic-leaning person, every man in Israel gets drafted, and I served 3 years of mandatory service. Luckily, it was peaceful time. It's not so peaceful over there right now, so it's horrific. But, surprise, surprise, I was a shy kid who was excelled in math and science and so on. But somehow I found myself having the fastest promotion record in my regiment's history, and got thrust into these leadership positions in this command and control model. And while I excelled at it, it really chafed at my soul, and I resolved to someday want to build an organization based on different principles for organizing and leading people. While command and control is important in battle, and you don't have time to take people into the conference room with a whiteboard and build consensus, like you go there or whatever. But, it doesn't bring out necessarily the best in human potential. So that became part of my driving purpose, dreams. And then I came to the U.S. and studied engineering and MBA and all of that. But then I became an entrepreneur and CEO. I started a company. It was called Individual Inc., and it was the first company to do personal newspapers. And you would get Jamal's Morning News that was personalized to you on your fax machine. I don't know how many people remember or even were born then when there was fax machines. This is late 1980s, early 90s. And it had self-learning agents, and you could tell it which articles were relevant or not, and then it would tune itself to your interest with machine learning. But beyond the business concept, the important thing is individual stood for an organizational principle which recognized the uniqueness of each individual and tried to create a culture and a teamwork environment where each individual can grow and thrive and excel and actualize their potential. So I was very focused on this business idea as well as organizational philosophy and culture. I was very identified with it. And the business was doing well and growing. And then the internet came, and it became clear that a lot of what we're doing via fax was going to become free and available, ad-supported over the internet. So that was a very dangerous time from a business standpoint. I had been working 70, 80 hours a week for, by then, probably 6 years or so. I was burning myself out. I started to get depressed. I was worried about our future. And I hit what is called a dark night of the soul. But I persevered and helped us churn our business around from a fax-based subscription to an internet-based ad-supported model. And we took the company public, and the stock price was rising. And I was really super stressed through it all, but kind of thriving in a way. And then I had sort of this mind-blowing experience of spiritual awakening. I was actually lying on a massage table, and I was trying to relax. and just calm my nervous system down. And then as I was lying there, somehow I all of a sudden felt like my body, the physicality and the matter of it was really made of consciousness, and the floor, the ground that I was looking at through the face cradle on the massage table was not separate from me, was within me, and then nothing was really separate. So I kind of felt the interconnectedness and oneness of everything, and that blew my circuits, my mind circuits, because it just couldn't contain that perception. And then it kind of threw me into a manic episode, and I had all these downloads about where the internet was going in the future, and personalized information and search engines and learning agents, and that was really hard to contain. And so my board freaked out because I wanted everything done yesterday, and my team freaked out because I wanted everything done yesterday. I was kind of consumed by this passion, and that led to them putting me on a leave of absence, and then me resigning, and then firing me. It was total disaster, very embarrassing, man. Very embarrassing. There were headline stories in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times. There were rumors about my mental health and all of that. And there was a lot of shame involved. Lots of friends stopped. But that really changed the direction of my life. And it kind of got me to think about, why was I so identified with the business? Why did I burn myself out? What was this experiences of oneness and spiritual awakening? Was it real? Was it delusion? And so ultimately that led me to go back and get a PhD in psychology, both to understand myself, what was this about, and understand, were these spiritual experiences real or are they delusions? So that led me to discover the concept of spiritual intelligence. I had known about emotional intelligence and all the research done about it and how it contributed to leadership and well-being. And then when I heard spiritual intelligence, which is a concept developed originally coined by a woman called Dana Zohar, but there was no definition and ways to measure it. So I got really interested in that, and that set me on a path to define it and create the first academically validated measure of it, and then show that it contributes to leadership effectiveness, that leaders will score higher on spiritual intelligence, lead teams with higher morale, greater commitment, lower turnover, and this is after you control for emotional intelligence. So both of them were contributing, but had a multiplicative effect. The spiritual intelligence, in a way, turbocharges emotional intelligence. And then since then, this measure I developed for spiritual intelligence has been used by other researchers to show there are many other benefits in terms of satisfaction with life, quality of life, mental health, quality of relationships, resilience, and so on. And it's even been shown that leaders with higher spiritual intelligence produce better financial results for their business units.
Amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. That's the nutshell. Well, there's so much I want to jump into here, but I want to repeat for the listeners here, kind of, here's what I'm hearing, and this is your background. You grew up in the state of Israel. Just curious, where in Israel were you born and raised?
Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv. Okay, so you grew up in Tel Aviv. You had pacifistic leanings, even at an early age. I find that to be very interesting, in light of obviously what came later for you as a spiritual awakening. I find that to be really fascinating. But you didn't really. What I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong here, is what I'm hearing you say is that you were reluctant to join the military, yet it's compulsory there. So you have to join. There's a draft. You were drafted. You realized in the military, right? And so I think most people, unless if you're not if you've never been in the military, right? The leadership model is not consensus based. It is hierarchical, right? So there's the chain of command, and there's no discussion. It's you're kind of owned by the state. You follow the chain of command. Your commanding officers give you orders. You follow them. There's no real discussion, and that created within you a desire for a different model of leadership, right? Even a lot of corporations function under hierarchical leadership as well. Governments do, military does.
Command and control, yeah.
Command and control. And so when you use command and control, I think I'm using the same word as hierarchical, but it's the same idea, right? Yeah. But you began to desire or have a longing for, at that point, a different a different structure altogether, that leadership is that would go beyond or transcend the command and control process, right? So then eventually that leads you get out of the military. But can you say more about your experience? I'm just curious, like as somebody growing up in, and obviously we do see now today that the Middle East and Israel and the Palestinian conflict and the situation that's going on there. I mean, it's obviously very part of the headlines now. The world is very focused there. But you grew up in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was your experience? And I know that you had an experience with because right now you're passionate about spiritual leadership, but a lot of times people confuse anything spiritual with religious. Can you talk about your experience with religious fundamentalism? How did it affect you? What was your experience with that at an early stage in your life?
Well, I mean, yeah, it leads to a polarized society within Israel. There are, very orthodox religious people that believe this is a Jewish state, and therefore, nobody should be able to drive on Shabbat and so on, and that that's on the one extreme, and then the other people who identify as Jewish culturally or ethnically, maybe observe certain holidays like it was done in my family, but weren't observing the strict laws or whatever and there's a lot of tension and about that was there at the time, and it's still there now, and between the secular and sort of, do the religious people go into the draft or not? So there's a lot of conflict around that. But I will say that, yeah, spirituality and religion are two different things, and I would also say that spiritual intelligence doesn't even require you to be spiritual per se. So this may sound a little paradoxical, so I'll come in to explain it. But what is spiritual intelligence? It's the ability to embody and draw on spiritual qualities and resources that have been hailed by all the world's spiritual traditions throughout millennia. And so what are those? These are things like purpose, service, trust, gratitude, humility, compassion, and so on. So these are qualities that, through my research, interviewing 71 leaders and teachers across all the world's traditions, whether it's a tradition like Islam or Christianity or Judaism that believes in a deity like God, or someone from Buddhism that believes in Buddha nature, or Taoism or shamanism, or Native Americans, Father Sky, Mother Earth, independent of how they view the world, they say purpose, service, compassion, integrity, humility, and so on are virtues. Now, modern science in the field of positive psychology has researched all these positive qualities, and they discovered those same qualities contribute to our well-being. Things like hope, gratitude, service, humility, beauty, joy. In the field of positive psychology, this is a measure developed by Marty Seligman called Values in Action, or Character Strengths Inventory. And they have 24 qualities they've identified that contribute to well-being, mental health, thriving in life. Over half of those map with those same qualities I identified in researching these spiritual teachers. And then one more domain, which is leadership development. So there was a study done by Bain & Company, one of the top 2 or 3 management consulting companies in the world, and they interviewed thousands of employees to see what contributes to inspiring leadership. And what they found is that employees that are inspired are twice as productive than those that are not. And then they identified 33 qualities that lead to inspiring leadership. And what were those? Service orientation, centeredness, presence, and so on, which again, over half map into these qualities of spiritual intelligence. All of this to say, and then when you look at my client base, I have clients that range from people that are devout practitioners of a religion, to people who consider themselves spiritual but not religious, to people that are agnostic, to devout atheists. Now, you can be a devout atheist and you can have spiritual intelligence qualities like gratitude, and you have a strong sense of purpose, and you're committed to service, and you're humble, and you have a sense of integrity. So these would all be spiritual intelligence qualities. You might not have others, but nobody has everything at the maximum scale. So spiritual intelligence is a multifaceted construct, just like IQ is. When you say IQ, we think it's one thing, but IQ consists of verbal intelligence as comprehension and vocabulary and composition, and you have spatial reasoning and mathematical reasoning and logical reasoning and memory and fluid intelligence, but all of that kind of gets lumped into IQ. So spiritual intelligence has all these qualities and resources, and you could be atheist and still have many of these qualities that you express in your life. And so you don't even have to be spiritual to be spiritually intelligent, at least in some dimensions, if I'm making any sense.
Yes, it's fascinating.
Now then you might ask, why is it called spiritual intelligence? And because these are the qualities that are viewed as virtues across all the world's spiritual traditions, one. And secondly, these qualities naturally emerge when you connect into your essence, your life force energy, which it comes from the word spirit. So what is spirit? Spiritual. It comes from Latin spiritus, which means the life animating breath, the force of life. So when you connect to your life force, essence, then these qualities naturally emerge.
They're naturally there. So can you, thank you for sharing, by the way.
I mean, I know I said a lot, but as I...
Well, thank you. Let's go, can you say again for the listeners, what are these qualities of that flow very naturally from, so you said spiritual is connecting to your essence, your life force essence. And in some of my work as a coach, what I like to talk about for folks is I say, what I mean by the word spiritual, because again, a lot of people may hear that word, everybody has their own grid through which they're processing that word. But I simply mean, when I say spiritual, beyond the physical, right? Something that's not in the physical dimension. So we can say life force essence, your essence, your the thing that makes you beyond your body, in your mind.
Okay, that's great.
So when you connect, so what I'm hearing you say is when we connect to that essential essence that is you beyond your physical composition, but beyond your physical body, there are these qualities that are naturally there. You don't have to learn them; they just emanate and flow, right? So can you talk about what those qualities are again?
Well, I named some of them. There's 22 of them, so I don't know that I can remember all of them, but they cluster into 5 domains, one having to do with meaning, which is things like purpose and service. And then there's a domain related to presence, which has to do with attention and intention and groundedness and empowerment. So that there are these different domains, and within each of them, there's one that's related to interacting with grace, and that has to do with trust, basic trust in the okayness of life, and that things will be okay regardless of how they turn out. There's a quality of joy and beauty and gratitude. Those have to all cluster together around this thing we call interacting with grace. There's a domain of wisdom, which has to do with higher self, with intuition, and so on. So I'm not right now off the top of my head remembering all 22 of them, but it's all on my website.
That's a good perspective, though, of like there are these dimensions, right? And these qualities that flow from that. So for you personally, which I'm fascinated by, you come to the U.S., you get, you start this company, you're an entrepreneur. Amazing. It sounds like artificial intelligence in the 90s, 80s and 90s, right? It's kind of what you were developing. A personal newspaper for each person where the news and information is tailored specifically to you. It was fascinating to you. You developed this company. in some ways, the company became your identity. Would you say? Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
It became.
yeah, exactly. That's why I got depressed when there was risk to our business future, and that's why I was overworking and so identified with it. Yeah, so
But you have this breakdown, which I don't know if I like the word. I understand the word breakdown, but you came to an end. Like you're obviously high stress. It's a publicly traded company, successful, by all the metrics. But you're getting this massage, and you have this experience, this awakening, in which, and again, I'm paraphrasing here, but what I heard you say is, I saw beyond the illusion of separation, that we really are all this entire thing that we call life is just connect. It's just being, it's connection. And you saw that you're literally connected to everything that there is, and that you are that. You are that essence, which then people thought you had lost your mind. They thought, okay,
well,
what
in a
happened?
way I did. My circuits blew up.
And so then you obviously lost your position as CEO of the company.
Founder, chairman, yeah.
Founder, chairman. So then, of course, that leads to, instead of being so focused externally, you shift that focus internally even more to dive in. And this led you to pursuing an entirely different, or what may have seemed like an entirely different career, right? You get MBA. Or maybe you got your MBA first, but you end up becoming a psychologist. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then now are pursuing, really educating the world on spiritual leadership. So fascinating. Now, how would you distinguish or discern if somebody were to ask you, well, what's the main difference between emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence? What's the difference between the two? Because a lot of people think of emotions and spiritual as being just all this beyond the physical dimension. It's all the same. But
all the
my understanding is that
stuff.
yeah, but what I'm hearing you say is that no, there's a distinction between the two. They're not exactly the same thing. So how would you distinguish between emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence?
Yeah, it's a good question. So let me just say that empirically they show small to moderate correlation. So in my doctoral study, I controlled for emotional intelligence, and I administered an emotional intelligence instrument in parallel with spiritual intelligence. And they showed a correlation of, I think it was somewhere in the 0.25 to 0.3. So there's some correlation. And that kind of has to do with their definition, but there's some clear distinction. So let's start with what is emotional intelligence. It's the ability to draw on emotional resources and information to help manage our own and others' emotions. So the focus is on emotional information and resources. So it has to do with, I'm aware when I'm angry, I'm aware when I'm sad, I'm aware when I'm happy, I'm aware when you're angry, when you're sad, when you're happy. I can read your cues. I know how to respond, in our relationship. So it has a lot to do with emotion and affect, internally and externally with people I'm interacting. Super important, no question about it. Now, spiritual intelligence, as I said, is the ability to draw on spiritual resources and qualities and embody them in daily life. So what are those? There's a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with emotion, like purpose or intuition or higher self. These are not emotional resources. They are different things. Now, why is there some overlap? Because emotional intelligence involves self-awareness of your emotions. Spiritual intelligence involves self-knowledge as a deeper level with things like mindfulness and so on. So that may include awareness of your emotions, but it will go deeper. Like spiritual intelligence gets you to focus on knowing yourself at a deeper level, which involves your unconscious and tuning into your dreams and things that might be lurking in the unconscious. So there's going to be some overlap. So the other things, for another example, is in emotional intelligence, you talk about self-regulation, the ability to regulate your emotions. So if I'm angry, I can regulate that. I'm not going to throw a shoe at you or a plate or something, or punch someone or start scream and yell and curse. Okay, that would be poor self-regulation when I'm angry, right? Now, spiritual intelligence has something similar, analogous, and it talks about equanimity. And equanimity or inner peace is I can be angry, I can regulate my emotion, but not only that, I am at peace internally at the deeper level that there is anger. So I don't identify with the anger. It's like there's waves going on at the surface of the ocean, but I am rooted deep at the bottom. And I see the waves, but in the bottom, if you've ever been in the ocean, while there's big waves at the top, there's quiet stillness, flow underneath. And that's equanimity. Not that the surface is always flat, No. So you could be in equanimity. It doesn't mean you're always neutral. You're never happy, you're never sad, you're never angry, you're never fearful. But you don't identify with that. You're rooted somewhere deeper, and then you are.
I love what you're saying here, because that's such a powerful point. I kind of, from what correct me here if I misspoke here, but it seems like what you're saying is, okay, when you're operating from spiritual intelligence, right? There's a dimension of where emotions are happening. You may be angry, you may be sad, you may be whatever it may be going on. And sometimes, like if you compare it in the ocean, right? If the surface layers, there may be some waves, there may be some disturbances. But if you go deep enough in this ocean, there is calm, there is peace. It's kind of like a hurricane, right? If you're in a hurricane, like there's an eye. And if you're in the eye, it's very peaceful, it's very calm. Yes, it's very turbulent on the edges out here, right? It's swirling. But if you're in the eye, it's almost like the storm doesn't affect you, but there is a storm happening. It's happening at the surface level. Exactly. So folks who are spiritually intelligent have an anchoring, right? Have an anchoring to this deeper dimension, and yet they're able to be present also for the emotional states that they may be experiencing. Some of it, there may be a disturbance, there may not be, but you're aware of it, but it's not all there is. If you're just emotionally intelligent and not spiritually intelligent, you're in whatever state you're in emotionally. That's all you have. Today's episode is sponsored by Free to Love Corporate Solutions. Did you know that any company or organization is only as competent, capable, and responsive as its workforce? And did you also know that, nationally speaking, it's been estimated that stress costs companies up to $150 billion, B with a billion, $150 billion in lost productivity every single year. What if your company and your place of work could actually be a source of healing and transformation for its workforce? Well, believe it or not, there is a growing community of conscious companies and businesses that see it as their mission to be a place of healing and transformation, not just for the products that they're offering to the wider world, but also they really desire that their place of employment would be a culture of healing and transformation for the workforce itself. And I've had the opportunity to work with a number of small businesses that are just doing fantastic work in the world. And I would like you to hear from the founder and CEO of a company that is striving to make a difference, not only in the world, but also in the people that work for the company.
I own a real estate brokerage, BRA Realty, here in Pennsylvania, and we have about 110 realtors. Jamal came out a few weeks back and did a training in replace of one of our regular trainings, and the feedback was phenomenal. Really stuck with me was he created a space of safety for a conversation of transformation to take place, where not just did agents walk away with great tips and insight about what's driving them, but also the ability for them to actually take the time and work on themselves in that session, specifically around getting clear on what matters most to them, and to the point where we had multiple agents that were actually crying. I had multiple agents come up to me afterwards just saying it was one of the best trainings we've ever done, and that we should have Jamal back once a month. So just to give you a quick shout out, Jamal, you did an amazing job. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for your ongoing coaching with myself. I've been working with you now for over 3 months and have had really, really great results. I intend to stick with it, as there's always room for growth, and having someone like you in my corner has been really helpful. So I appreciate everything you do, and thanks for being you.
So if you're a small business owner, maybe you're on the executive team, you're a founder, a CEO, or even if you're just in management of some level at a company or in a corporate culture where you oversee people at any capacity, and if you're interested in having a conversation where we may be able to explore how our program can assist you, can assist your company, and assist your workforce, I'd love to have a conversation with you about that possibility. All you have to do is go to my website, jamaljavanji.com/corporate solutions. Again, that's jamaljavanji.com/corporate solutions. You'll be able to fill out a form there, and we will get back with you and set up a time to have a conversation with you about how we can assist you in transforming your company. You're high, you're low, you're this or that.
You may be aware of it, and you're not screaming and cursing
Right.
when you're angry, but you don't have that rooted anchoring and that deeper essence of yours, which gives you a whole different level of equanimity and inner peace, as you're summarizing very well.
Totally. And equanimity, the equanimous state or equanimity, is the state of non-resistance, right? It's like I'm not in resistance. I'm at peace. There's a harmony or balance that
I'm in the flow of life, and it
emerges.
emerges out of that deep trust that we have in the flow of life. So, it's not trying to control the future that is uncontrollable, but I can go all out for what I believe in and have a basic trust that I will be okay, even if my particular goal is not achieved. So, it's like I'm swimming down the stream of the river of life, and there might be boulders along the way, there might be rocks, and I'm going to navigate my way through it. But there's a basic trust that that river of life is going okay, and it's going to end up at the ocean, and I'll be at the ocean, and I'll be enjoying the ocean when I get there. How I get there, I don't know. There might be some turbulence along the way, yeah. But I'm not resisting, as you said. I'm not trying to swim upstream, because the river's destiny is the ocean. And I'm happy to go down the ocean, and there might be different sceneries along the way. And I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I embrace the flow of life because I trust I'll be okay.
Yes. I love that. One of my teachers said this. She defined patience. She said, patience, which is, we may say is a spiritual quality, but she said that patience is not waiting, as if it's commonly taught. It's like you're just waiting for something to happen in the future that you want. But she said that patience is simply confident awareness that everything I want is actually unfolding in the moment.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of like what you're saying, like, oh yeah, the flow is taking me to the ocean. Like I already know it's going there. I don't have to worry or be afraid. Now, I don't know how that's going to happen, but I'm confidently aware that it is happening, so I can participate with what's happening in this moment, which puts you in an equanimous state.
Yeah, and I can enjoy the scenery as I'm going down the river. There's these trees on there, there are these rocks around, there's whatever. Sometimes I have to swim fast, sometimes I have to navigate around the eddy, sometimes I have to avoid these rocks, I have to avoid these boulders. And so, yeah, it's kind of an adventure, and if you've ever gone whitewater rafting, it's kind of like that.
I have, yes, totally. And some of the terror or fear is if we don't know that we're going to be okay, right? Then it can be scary. But if you know, then you can enjoy the ride. I equate it to a movie. Like we go to a movie, we don't know how it's going to end. Actually, if we know how it's going to end, we wouldn't like that. So, but we don't worry about it, right? Because we know that it's okay. It's going to end.
Sometimes we get caught up in the drama of the movie and we forget that it's a movie. And then it's like we're biting our nails in the middle of the movie.
Right.
It's just like we're on the edge. You know, there's this monster about to take. Well, it's just happening on the screen. And the screen is not affected, you know, regardless of what's being projected on the screen. You know, you can project the worst horror on the screen, but the screen is like, okay.
Totally. So spiritual intelligence in watching a movie would be awareness in that moment when your emotions are high or low, being aware that, okay, this is actually a film. And everything's okay, and there are cars outside, and there's life outside this theater, and I'm in the theater just observing a drama, and it's actually all okay. That would be spiritual awareness in that situation. Would you say?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. It's one analogy, metaphor.
Yeah, and you know, I know that your work, a lot of your work centers around working with corporate executives, CEOs, you know, folks in leadership. Would you say, just based on your experience and working with folks, would you say that a lot of leaders are emotionally intelligent?
They develop it. I mean, some more than others. I've worked with over 100 CEOs, you know, and they're all over the spectrum. But over time, they become more emotionally intelligent. Sometimes, I particularly work a lot with startup entrepreneurs and CEOs in the Valley. And sometimes when they start, you know, they're just a techie who developed some new chip or some new algorithm or some new app, and they're young in their 20s and they don't have a lot of emotional intelligence, but they have a great idea and a product that takes off. And then it's my job and their job to grow their emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence. And if they can, and some of them do, then they can grow as the leader. And you see some people that have grown and have become CEOs, and as the company has grown to hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. And sometimes they can't, and they're the great product visionary, but then the board or whatever decides like, hey, you're great in strategy and vision, but we need to bring someone else who knows how to manage the team and create the culture, etc. And
totally,
you know,
so I want to share this with you. Tell me what your perceptions are. My observations of leaders, folks, and I don't have the experience of working with corporate executives that you have. You know, you've been working with them for a long time and worked with a large number of them. But just in the limited interaction I've had with corporate executives and leaders, is that the more emotionally intelligent a leader is, the more they can build a team or an organization, because they get people to, I think if you're emotional intelligence is going to mirror your own emotional intelligence. Like you said, I think you said earlier, like if you know what you're feeling, you're going to have a leg up on knowing what another person's feeling or not feeling, because you have a lot of, this is all projection, right? If you're not in touch with your own emotions, it's hard to be in touch with the emotions of other people. So the more a leader is in touch with their emotions, like they know when they're sad, when they're happy, when they're dysregulated, they're going to know that about other people, and they're going to be able to lead or govern people more effectively.
And we have this thing called mirror neurons, which
sure.
And so through mirror neurons, if we pay attention to how we feel, it gives us information about people around us, what's happening for them. But anyway, sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
No, that's okay. So emotionally intelligent leaders, there's a lot of them. They build great teams. They have a great organization. They have a lot of teams. But it's been my experience, but correct, I want to hear your thoughts on this, that there are very few spiritually intelligent leaders. That is a rarity, whether it be at the corporate level, it be at the governmental level, that there's a lot of great, like, because if the more emotionally intelligent you are, you're going to climb up the ranks. There's a lot of great emotionally intelligent leaders, but spiritually intelligent leaders are just are extremely rare. Is that been your findings as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, it only makes sense, right? I mean, 30 years ago, before emotional intelligence came into vogue and all these books and workshops and whatever. So there was a lot less in emotional intelligence among executives, and we were still more in the industrial society, and you were working, and you could sort of try and adapt the command and control and manage people on an assembly line and so on. But as we move from an industrial society and an information society to a knowledge-based economy, no longer can I command people who need to be creative, whether it's in marketing or graphic design or branding or software engineering or some other kind of engineering. It's not a command and control model. So you have to motivate, you have to bring teams together to collaborate, you have to now create what is talked about as psychological safety so that people can speak their mind and you can collaborate and come up with better ideas. So, but luckily, emotional intelligence came into vogue and more people got trained, and now there's schools even that have curriculum on emotional social learning. But there hasn't been that same thing with spiritual intelligence, and that's what I'm trying to do. And so there has been, in some places, spiritual-based leadership that people talk about, but within a particular faith tradition. So, right. There are certain companies or organizations might say, okay, we're a Christian organization, and everybody we're gonna do spiritual leadership, but, from that perspective, which, is fine if you want to keep homogeneous, but I think it's a lot more interesting to have these universal virtues and qualities, and you don't have to, believe in the second coming of Jesus or in Muhammad or in the Buddha nature. You're just part of these things. You believe in purpose and service and gratitude and appreciation and interconnectedness. So, but that's kind of the vision I'm trying to promote, which I think is so crucial at this time of humanity's evolution, because when you look at what's happening, IQ has gotten us to the moon, to split the atom, to decode the genome. Emotional intelligence has done all the things you've talking about. But if you look at mental health, anxiety, depression, loneliness is an epidemic. So many species are disappearing. There's such an extreme polarization politically. You can see what's going on around the election now. Wars going on, raging in the world. And unless we understand our interconnectedness, our shared humanity, and give dignity to the differences and uniqueness of all of these cultures, I think we're in for a very rough ride, and I don't know how we deal with these existential risks and what people are talking about, the meta crisis.
That's fascinating. Absolutely, it's incredible what you're saying here, and I've had the same thought, and I know that this is we're approaching a massive election, right? Next, we're recording this just days away from the next presidential election. There's a lot of anxiety and angst. I think we are developing. I mean, there's AI as a thing, right? It's huge. There's a big conversation. Is it going to take over the world? Are we going to, is humanity going to suffer at the hands of this new technology? And anytime that technology advances in a way that is not proportionate with our spiritual evolution, we have problems. So, and it seems to me that technology is exploding at a rate, and right now, our spiritual evolution is not keeping pace with our technological advancement, or even our emotional. So we have IQ and EQ, right, has got us to where we are today. But it's been my understanding that all war and conflict is a result of a lack of spiritual intelligence, not actually emotional or intellectual intelligence.
Right. Yeah, it's the misunderstanding of lack of understanding of our interconnectedness, and that we're part of this bigger web of life organism. So, up until the Copernican revolution and Galileo, we used to think that the Earth is at the center and the sun goes around it, because that's how it looks through the day, right? And when you look right now, you think we're all different, separate objects. There's finite resources. We're all fighting for the certain amount of oil and water and resources and whatever. But, the spiritually intelligent thing is to understand that we're part of this one web of life. I mean, this plant here sitting on my desk and the tree I'm looking at the window may seem separate, but really every breath I'm taking, the oxygen I'm taking is they're exhaling. And then when I exhale, I'm exhaling CO2, and that's what feeds them their quote-unquote oxygen that then they turn into my oxygen. So we are in this web of life, and we are unique expressions, unique cells. So if you look at a cell in your body, okay, it has to keep its own integrity to function. But it's functioning within a context of an organ or a system, whether it's your liver or your kidney or your heart or your thyroid or whatever it might be. So if the cell is healthy and taking care of itself, but if it's in an organ that's getting sick or getting cancerous or the body is getting cancer, at some point that cell is going to die. It can't just so it has to take care of itself, but it has to take care of itself and figure out its role, its unique contribution, its gift to the overall organism. And its well-being depends not only on how it's doing, quote-unquote, individually, but how the whole, that organism it's embedded in. And we're embedded in this organism called humanity, 100%. Which is embedded in this greater web of life. And until and when we have that shift of understanding from ego-focus to eco-focus, that's our Copernican revolution in human consciousness. And this is key for the future of humanity and our well-being as individuals.
100%. 100%. And what's interesting, you talk about the symbiotic relationship, right? You have that plant is exhaling, you're inhaling what the plant is exhaling. The plant is inhaling what you're exhaling. And it's like, this isn't just happening at the level of plants and humans. I mean, this is happening in every single dimension of life, this symbiotic, interconnected relationship. And when you have that awareness, it occurred to me. I wrote a book in 2019 called Living for a Living, and it really deals with this idea of lack and the concept of like abundance. Like, right, if you tune into the interconnectedness of life, you realize really quickly that lack is such an illusion. Yet, if we operate from lack, right, from that perception of lack, this is what's causing the strife, the conflict in so much of the world. I mean, we're fighting over a perception of limited resources, perception of limited, and this can even have emotional implications, perception of limited love, limited acceptance, limited whatever. But lack is really a consequence, in my understanding, lack is a consequence of a lack of spiritual intelligence. Because if you have a spiritual awareness or intelligence, you realize there's no lack because we're all interconnected. And and going back to identity. So this is also, I was having this conversation with speaking of the Middle East conflict, I was talking to two different people at some certain points during this crisis, this current crisis in the Middle East with the Palestinian-Israeli situation. And I was talking about peace and the qualities of peace and what's needed and all of these things. And I had both an Israeli person and a Palestinian person push back on my both of them pushed back, and they said, well, it's easy for you to talk about peace from your position of privilege, but it's not your people that are dying. And I heard this from both sides, and it struck me, that comment, and I thought about that, and then my response was, but it is my people. And they said, well, are you Palestinian? Are you Israeli? Both sides asked me that, and I said, I'm human. As you are. Humans are my people. Yeah. And just that is a spiritual awareness, right? If we're not spiritually aware, we may think we're different. We may think I'm an American and you're something else. I'm a Republican, you may be a Democrat. This is a fundamental problem of a lack of spiritual intelligence. And I'm passionate about leaders. Like, we have to have leaders in the world who are spiritually intelligent. So I'm such a fan that there are people like you that exist that are doing this kind of work. But I guess maybe we can wrap up with this question, right? Because the real question is like, well, practically speaking, how do we encourage or cultivate spiritual intelligence in folks that are maybe even starting with the people who are listening to this podcast, including myself? How would you advise us? What would you say? How can we start cultivating this spiritual intelligence, dimension of spiritual intelligence in our own lives?
Well, first of all, we have to cognitively believe that this makes sense. Okay, so that's why the science and whatever, and it's important not to create a dichotomy between
science
and spirituality, or or cognitive intelligence and spiritual intelligence, and nature or God or whatever you want to believe. It didn't give us cognitive intelligence, so we ignore it. That's not what I'm trying to advocate it here. So understand that there is a good science that says if you do this or you develop this, you're going to be healthier and you're going to be happier and you're going to live an inspired, empowered, and connected life. So that's what the research says. So once you buy into this vision or this fact that's researched, then you say, okay, I want to cultivate these qualities. Yeah, people who are grateful, and as it's been said, you're not grateful because you're happy. You become happy when you're grateful. So you say, okay, I want to work on gratitude. So you pick one quality, you build a habit around it. And you say, okay, every day when I wake up, I'm going to think about my day. I'm going to look at my thing and say, where are my opportunities to enjoy my day, to feel connected, to share some love and connection or appreciation. And then I go through my day, and I'm already in a gratitude mindset. Right now, I'm here with you, and I'm like, okay, I'm grateful. This person is giving me an opportunity. They're listening very well. They're reflecting very well. And Jamal is really supporting this shared vision that we have. So I'm grateful right now. And I could see the beauty. I see the plant here. I see some of your smile, and you're nodding, and we're connected. So there's joy, there's pleasure, there's beauty, there's gratitude as I go through. And then at night, I'm going to practice gratitude again. As I go to sleep, I'll review my day. What are all the things that I've been grateful for? And I'm going to think, oh, that conversation with Jamal was something I'm grateful for. So for a month, I imbue my life with gratitude. That's my thing. Okay, next month, I'm going to say, I'm going to pick another quality. That'd be beauty, joy, whatever it might be, compassion, and I'm going to develop practices and develop that muscle. And so, I mentioned there are 22, so qualities, it might take some time, but it's a lifelong journey. But as we said, it all starts when you connect to your essence, your life force energy. And that's the other thing I could do, is I could learn how to do that, to connect with my essence, my life force energy, which you could do these anytime during the day. You don't have to do a 20-minute meditation. You can, that's great. But like right now, I can connect with my breath, which is the expression of my life force energy. Take a few deep inhales, exhale. And then I feel my contact with Mother Earth, which is always holding and pulling me and embracing me into her center through the force of gravity, also supporting me through the surface to be as I am. I can feel my heartbeat, my pulse, which is another expression of being alive biologically. I can feel my spine, which is the information superhighway of the nervous system of the body that gives my brain and my consciousness awareness of the coolness of my hands right now, and the warmth in my underarms, in my eyes that see you. So all of that is traveling through my spine, through my body, the distributed intelligence. And then the spine is this channel that connects the crown top of my head to the sky, to the sun, and the light that's coming from above, and then the ground below. And so right there, all of a sudden, my experience of myself has shifted. I'm no longer some object, some body. There's just a living presence that is here right now. And from here, there's a lot more equanimity, a lot more peace, a lot more calmness. a lot more connection with you and
It's presence.
pleasant
Yeah.
presence. Yeah.
Yeah. So good.
So I don't know, how long did that take? 2 minutes, 1 minute to just kind of do that?
Yeah. It's almost just like scanning of your life. It's like, oh, I'm aware I'm connected to this earth, which is grounding me and anchoring me. I'm connected to the height of the cosmos that is pulling me up. You know, from the ground, I have this living breath inside of my body, running through my body. My
heart is beating.
Yeah, it's electrical impulse. I always like to tell people, like, where does that electricity come from? Are you plugged into something? Well, at some level, right? It's coming from somewhere.
Yeah. Well, the Earth has electromagnetic pulsation, and so is our heart. Within 6 feet of each other, our hearts create electromagnetic interaction.
Between people.
Yeah, between people. And this has been researched and measured.
Amazing. I love it. And I love what you said about there's not a dichotomy, right, between the science, the cognitive understanding of this, and the spiritual. Like, these are not separate things. These are actually, like, we don't need to make that division, right? These things are all, they work together. And so you're passionate about helping people raise their cognitive awareness to this science of spirituality.
Yeah, science of spiritual intelligence. And
yes. I love it. I love it. I feel like we could probably have this conversation for many hours. And there's
in
a
many
lot
days,
we could say.
and many months and years and lifetimes, maybe.
Yes, yes. Where can people get in touch with you or find out more about your work?
So I have my website. It's yosiamram.net, just like my name, and that can connect you to, my book and free workshops that I hold once a month and so on. There's also a YouTube channel, which is at Awakening Spiritual Intelligence, all one word. So there's videos and talks and things, and I'm on Instagram, and I have a blog on Psychology Today that for people that want to read that. So there are many channels, but I would say the one place to start would be yosiamram.net or my YouTube channel, Awakening Spiritual Intelligence.
Awesome. And is your YouTube channel linked to your website there? Is that information
Yeah, I think
there?
if you read the description, it says, you can go to yosiamram.net.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
my name is a little different, so some people would have a hard time capturing. How do you spell that?
So YOSIAMRAM.net.
M, 2 M's, not N's.
Yep.
M like Mary.
AM, yep. AM as in Mary, RAM as in Mary, Amram.net.
Yes.
And we'll put this in the show notes, so there'll be a link there so people can go to it. And,
awesome.
When I send out my newsletter to my database, I'll make sure to have that link to your website in there as well when we publish the show. So I just want to thank you. I just appreciate your courage to live your life and to have these experiences. I feel like life knows who to entrust these experiences to, and you were entrusted with this awareness and these breakthroughs, and I love that you're helping educate folks on the science of spiritual intelligence. You're helping to educate leaders. I mean, we really, really, really need more leaders who are spiritually intelligent. We need them at every level: business, government. And I believe that is the work in the next 2 decades. It's imperative that we raise the spiritual intelligence of the planet. And a lot of people are doing this work, and I'm thankful that you're doing this work. And thank you for making yourself available, the generosity of your time here for our listeners. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. And we're all in this together, so I appreciate you kind of helping. We're in this together, so I think I can't do this by myself. You can't do this by yourself, and we're just, the more of us kind of transmit this message, embody it, And people say, well, I kind of like hanging around Jamal. He's got this spirit, he's energy, he's joyful, there's a spark to him. When I'm around him, I feel inspired. And I was like, what is that? And he said, well, I'm kind of doing this. And so you become a vehicle, a channel, a Wi-Fi extender. We need this mesh network, the Wi-Fi network of people that are helping spread this around our planet through the grids that connect us.
Yeah, amazing. I just watched a documentary. Came back from a trip. It just you're saying this kind of inspired me. Like, especially even thinking about, you said the heartbeat, right? When your heart beats and you're around, what was it, 6 feet? Did you say six?
Within 6 feet.
Within 6 feet, another human being, your heartbeat can influence the other person. And I was just watching a documentary about Jimmy Carter. And he had the Camp David peace accord there in the late 70s, 78, 79, I think it was. And he invited the Israeli prime minister, was it
Begin.
Begin and Anwar Sadat, right, from Egypt. And I mean, it was intense. And there was, and he, first of all, was leaning, to me, it seemed like, just watching this documentary, it's a fantastic documentary, he leaned into it was not politically, it was actually a very risky political move on his part to do this. So a lot of people his advisors were saying, don't do this. Like, why do you need this to do? Like, this is not going to benefit your reelection because it's going to fail, number one, because they don't like each other. They're not going to, somehow he leaned into his, we might say, spiritual intelligence. He felt compelled. He brought them together to this Camp David, and they didn't, at certain points, both of them threatened to leave. They're like, well, this is a pointless, but and they refused to meet with each other. They started meeting, then they got in arguments, the prime minister and the president of Egypt. And so finally they said, well, we're going to meet in separate cabins. We don't even want to talk to each other. We're going to be in separate cabins. So Jimmy Carter became the go-between, and he would sit with each one, sit with them, like literally sit with them. And I'm thinking about, it was within 6 feet of each other, and he would talk with them. And something happened in that dialogue with these two people. Even though they weren't talking to each other, he was influencing their, even the science of it, I'm sure we could see, like, this, his electromagnetic signal, he's sitting there, is affecting these folks. And it was collapsing. The whole thing looked like it was coming apart. And he just had this inspired thought, Jimmy Carter did. He said, these are both grandfathers. Both the Israeli prime minister and the president of Egypt are grandfathers. So he found pictures of their grandchildren. And he sat there with them. They were about to leave. They were packing their bags to leave. Complete failure. And he said, no, I'm just going to sit with them. And he showed them pictures of their grandchildren. He said, these are your grandchildren. Tell me about them. And they started talking about their grandchildren. And that was the moment both of them, independently of each other, decided, we're not going to leave until we have an agreement. Because it's for them, for these children, that we're doing this. And it led to the first ever historic peace agreement between Israel and an Arab country. And to me, that's a picture of spiritual leadership, spiritual intelligence, connection, just being in the presence. It was like, could they have this conversation over the phone? Couldn't they have had this? Well, yeah, they technically could. But there's something about getting together at this camp in nature, right, surrounded by trees. It was a camp, and they had them together, and he sat physically in the presence. And it took a spiritually intelligent person to do that. What are the power of spiritually intelligent leadership? It's just amazing.
A beautiful story, Jamal. Yeah, that's what we're
blown away
about.
with that. Yeah,
that's what we need. So
we do need that.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a good place to
wrap this up. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you for the work you're doing. And guys, thank you for listening. We always look forward to your comments and questions. Please send them in. You can always email me, jamal@jamaljavanji.com. And I would love to dialogue with you. And please do check out Yosi's website, which we'll have in the show notes. Anyway, thank you, Yosi. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise, thank you so much for the work you're doing and resonating with these important messages, and I will have to run because I'm late. So, but again, have a great weekend. I hope to stay in touch. So I will tune in and follow your future podcasts. If you're interested, I can add you to my email list so you can stay abreast and with what I'm up to, and we'll be in touch. We'll see how we can keep moving the ball forward here.
Would love that. Thank you so much for listening all the way through to the end of this podcast episode. When you show up and you receive the gift that was for you in this episode, it not only benefits you, it benefits all those that you love and the wider world around us. This work that you're doing, the hunger that you have, it's so important, and I commend you for tuning in and being open. If this podcast has been a blessing to you, then I would ask that you do something to give back to this episode, to give back to this podcast. One of the things that you can do, and it's cost-free, very easy, and is super helpful, is if you'll just go to iTunes and rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Also, if you'll go to Spotify, if you listen on Spotify, go to Spotify and rate and review this podcast on Spotify. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. It makes a huge difference in the algorithm, and it helps people find our show. Thank you again for being here. And until next time, take care.